I don't want to give away any spoilers. The very first time we met, we had a 3-hour meeting. And by the end of that meeting, I just knew she was Lily. We had
Blake Lively's recent controversy is reigniting headlines across Hollywood. And this time, it's extending far beyond the ongoing Justin Baldoni lawsuit. Industry insiders claim that her so-called mean girl attitude isn't new at all, but rather part of a long-standing pattern of behind-the-scenes tension that has followed her from one project to another. Whispers of diva-like behavior and controlling tendencies reportedly go back to her early television days, where crew members described her as meticulous to a fault, and co-stars often felt overshadowed. Over time, this reputation for stirring up drama seems to have only grown stronger, and now it appears that even one of her biggest alleged victims, Margot Robbie, may have experienced the brunt of it firsthand. According to multiple reports, what was originally meant to be a landmark collaboration on the Barbie movie, a bright, optimistic, and empowering story celebrating womanhood and creative unity, turned unexpectedly tense once Blake became involved. At first, she seemed like a perfect fit for the role. She shared history with America Ferrera through the sisterhood of the traveling pants. Her polished style embodied classic Barbie glamour, and her Hollywood status added commercial weight to the project. Everything on paper suggested a match made in cinematic heaven. However, those early hopes reportedly began to fade as production discussions unfolded. While Margot Robbie, Issa Rae, Dua Lipa, and Hari Nef embraced the spirit of collaboration, diversity, and shared spotlight, sources say Blake had different plans. Rather than contributing to the ensemble energy that the film's creators envisioned, she allegedly wanted the focus squarely on herself. Crew members claim she frequently questioned creative decisions, demanded wardrobe changes, and expressed frustration when attention shifted toward other cast members. What was intended to be a celebration of inclusivity and empowerment allegedly began to feel more like a competition for control. One insider even described Blake's on-set demeanor as if the entire movie existed to showcase her, adding that this mindset created growing friction among cast and crew. The tension reportedly reached a point where even Margot Robbie, who served as both the film's star and producer, had to intervene to maintain harmony on set. The environment that had once been full of laughter, color, and sisterhood allegedly transformed into a quiet battlefield of ego and unspoken resentment. Instead of being remembered as a creative triumph of unity, the Barbie set, according to those close to the production, became another chapter in the ongoing saga of Blake Lively's complicated Hollywood reputation. Behind the dazzling world of pink sets, glossy smiles, and empowering soundtracks, the Barbie movie reportedly hit a storm that very few outside the production ever saw coming. While the public narrative celebrated collaboration, inclusivity, and sisterhood, insiders claim that behind closed doors, Blake Lively had her own very different vision for the film, one centered on control and self-promotion rather than creative unity. According to multiple production sources, Blake didn't just want to star in Barbie, she wanted to steer it. From the earliest stages of development, she allegedly began pushing for greater creative authority, requesting script adjustments, extra dialogue, and even new scenes designed to amplify her presence. Those close to the project said it felt like she wanted to reshape the movie into a vehicle for her personal brand, turning what was meant to be a cultural statement about empowerment into a showcase of celebrity power. What began as small creative suggestions soon reportedly evolved into a pattern of demands. Blake's notes to the writing team were described as constant and often conflicting with Greta Gerwig's established vision. Crew members recall how production meetings that should have been quick and efficient sometimes dragged on for hours as debates over creative direction intensified. Some insiders even claimed that Blake insisted her version of Barbie should appear more sophisticated and mature, a subtle but significant deviation from Greta and Margot Robbie's playful, inclusive tone. As a result, the balance of the film began to tilt, threatening to undermine the team dynamic that Margot and Greta had worked so hard to create. But this time, Blake's ambition put her in direct conflict with someone who wasn't just another co-star, Margot Robbie. Margot wasn't merely the film's face. She was its heartbeat, leading as both the star and producer through her powerhouse company, Lucky Chap Entertainment. Known in the industry for her grace, fairness, and professionalism, Margot was praised for fostering a creative environment where everyone's voice mattered. So when Blake allegedly started asserting control and overstepping creative boundaries, Margot reportedly had no hesitation in drawing the line. One insider revealed that Margot handled it with total calm and authority, but made it unmistakably clear that Barbie would remain a Greta Gerwig vision, not a Blake Lively vanity project. That decisive stance effectively shut down any attempt at a power shift, solidifying Margot's authority both on and off camera. Ironically, Margot herself has said that she didn't even audition for the role of Barbie. As producer, she technically cast herself, but she still approached the project with humility and a deep respect for Greta's artistry. "I told Greta, you don't have to write it for me. I just want to make this movie happen," Margot shared in an interview. Her goal was always to empower the team, not control it, a mindset that starkly contrasted with Blake's alleged behavior. Sources said that when Greta and Margot pushed back against Blake's creative intrusions, her demeanor changed dramatically. Gone was the cheerful, approachable energy she often displayed in interviews. Instead, she reportedly became cold, guarded, and distant. Crew members described an uncomfortable tension that lingered in the air during filming, as if everyone was waiting for the next conflict to erupt. Things reportedly grew so strained that Blake began isolating herself from the rest of the cast, showing up late to rehearsals and keeping conversations strictly professional. Her once bright enthusiasm for the film seemed to vanish, replaced by frustration and resentment. Even her interactions with Greta Gerwig reportedly grew terse, with one insider claiming Blake stopped taking notes from the director altogether. The friendly and collaborative energy that had defined the early days of filming quickly soured into quiet hostility. And yet, despite the mounting tension, none of this turmoil ever reached the public eye. Hollywood has a way of protecting its biggest productions, and the Barbie movie was no exception. Ironclad contracts, NDAs, and carefully managed press tours kept the chaos firmly behind closed doors. To outsiders, everything appeared flawless: pink carpets, empowering interviews, and perfect smiles. But for those who were there, the experience painted a very different picture. One of ego clashes, artistic battles, and quiet power plays. By the time Blake's name quietly disappeared from discussions surrounding the film, insiders say it was no surprise to anyone involved. "It was bound to happen," one crew member allegedly stated. Margot runs a tight, respectful set. Anyone trying to take over wasn't going to last long. And so, while audiences around the world celebrated Margot Robbie's triumphant portrayal of Barbie, those within the industry whispered about the version of the movie that almost was, the one where Blake Lively's star power might have changed the story completely. Whispers began to ripple quietly through Hollywood's most exclusive circles, those late-night phone calls between publicists, the untraceable blind items on gossip sites, and the subtle shade dropped during press interviews that only industry insiders could decode. Every major production has its share of secrets, but the Barbie movie seemed unusually spotless, too perfect, almost sterile in its image. Behind the candy-colored marketing and pink-tinted PR smiles, however, people were talking. Rumors spread of clashing egos, of power struggles that nearly derailed key scenes, and of creative tensions that the public would never see. Under normal circumstances, such leaks would have gone viral within hours, plastered across tabloids and entertainment blogs. But this time, Margot Robbie handled it with an almost surgical level of professionalism. She reportedly clamped down on every leak, restricted access to press insiders, and ensured that her cast and crew stayed loyal to the narrative of unity. It was a level of crisis management that only someone with her experience and discipline could pull off. A textbook example of how to control chaos without ever showing the cracks. Margot, as both star and producer, was determined that Barbie would be remembered for its joy and message, not for any behind-the-scenes drama. Behind-the-scenes drama. She had spent years building Lucky Chap Entertainment into a studio synonymous with female-led storytelling, and she refused to let gossip jeopardize that reputation. While other producers might have panicked, she reportedly responded with calm efficiency, focusing on keeping morale high and communication clear. She encouraged Greta Gerwig and the team to drown out distractions and focus on what mattered, creating a film that would inspire audiences worldwide. By the time Barbie hit theaters, her plan had worked flawlessly. Not a single rumor broke the surface, and the entire operation remained so airtight that even seasoned Hollywood journalists admitted they had never seen such effective containment. And the payoff was enormous. Barbie didn't just perform well, it became a phenomenon. The film went on to gross over $1 billion globally, earned massive critical acclaim, and became a cultural event unlike anything the industry had seen in years. From fan art to Halloween costumes to viral TikToks, the Barbie wave took over pop culture. Its soundtrack topped charts, its aesthetics redefined brand marketing, and its themes of self-discovery and empowerment resonated with generations of women. Critics hailed it as a triumph of creative collaboration and a landmark for female directors. And through all that success, one thing became clear. Nobody left the theater thinking the movie needed more Blake Lively. Not a single viewer wished for her version of Barbie or imagined the film revolving around her. The chemistry between Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, America Ferrera, and the rest of the cast was perfection. The balance, tone, and humor were pitch perfect. Exactly the kind of harmonious blend that can only emerge when ego takes a back seat to teamwork. While Margot, Greta, and the rest of the ensemble embraced collaboration, Blake allegedly pursued something very different. Sources close to the project claim that Blake wasn't satisfied being one part of a larger story. She wanted to be the story. Her focus, they said, wasn't on the film's message but on her personal image. She reportedly sought the kind of spotlight that comes with headline roles and standout moments, where every camera, line, and costume choice enhanced her own brand rather than the ensemble dynamic. That desire for dominance didn't sit well on a set built around inclusivity and shared empowerment. Insiders have described it as a clash of philosophies. Margot and Greta prioritized collaboration, while Blake was allegedly driven by control. And the pattern didn't end there. Those who had worked with her before claimed this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar stories surfaced during the production of It Ends With Us, where reports of friction between Blake and director Justin Baldoni made their way into the industry rumor mill. What started as creative disagreements allegedly escalated into heated arguments, culminating in Blake's dissatisfaction with the final direction of the project. Then, as the film wrapped, headlines erupted. Lawsuits, accusations, and public statements that turned what should have been a career milestone into a legal and reputational storm. Many observers couldn't help but see the parallels. A talented actress who wanted more control, a set destabilized by conflicting egos, and a public narrative that spiraled out of her grasp. The contrast between Blake and Margot couldn't have been sharper. Margot Robbie, known for her quiet confidence and grace, had long made it clear that leadership wasn't about control, but collaboration. Her success as both actor and producer came from trusting her directors, writers, and co-stars to do their best work without interference. She once said in an interview that the actors she admired most were those who became part of the creative process, not to dominate it but to elevate it. Ironically, Blake once expressed nearly the same sentiment, describing how she felt drawn to roles that allowed her to shape the story and get her hands dirty in the creative process. But according to insiders, what Margot managed with tact, Blake often approached with tension. What one woman turned into empowerment, the other allegedly turned into conflict. And as Barbie became a record-breaking success, the contrast between their approaches became even more glaring. Margot's collaborative leadership had built a billion-dollar cultural milestone, one that inspired conversation, nostalgia, and genuine joy. Meanwhile, the whispers around Blake's name continued to grow louder, painting a portrait of an actress whose ambition too often overshadowed her artistry. By the end, the message was crystal clear. Margot Robbie didn't just play Barbie, she embodied everything the character stood for. And Blake Lively, once poised to join that legacy, had instead become a cautionary tale about what happens when control eclipses collaboration. What makes this entire situation even more shocking is that Blake Lively has, in many ways, openly acknowledged this mindset in past interviews, almost admitting, without realizing it, how much control she craves over her projects. Years ago, she said something along the lines of, "I realize that half of an actor's best work comes from just taking the role and chilling." It was meant to sound humble, self-aware, and grounded. But insiders claim her behavior tells a completely different story. Instead of chilling, Blake reportedly insists on being involved in every decision, from wardrobe and lighting to script revisions and marketing angles. It's as if she doesn't just want to act, she wants to direct the narrative itself. According to those who've worked with her, the pattern is always the same. When she feels in control, she shines. But the moment she loses that control, the tension begins, the mood shifts, and the drama inevitably follows. Meanwhile, as Blake was allegedly chasing control, Margot Robbie was chasing something far more productive: the perfect Ken. Behind the scenes of Barbie, Margot was laser-focused on one thing: securing Ryan Gosling for the role. She knew from the start that his mix of charm, humor, and sincerity would be the key to balancing the film's tone, and she was willing to do just about anything to convince him. Margot later confessed in interviews that she made Ryan a unique promise. "I told him I'd give him a gift every day he showed up to set." Once he agreed, she actually followed through, sending him Ken-themed presents like puka shell necklaces, horse trinkets, and absurdly over-the-top pink accessories. It was funny, lighthearted, and totally in sync with the spirit of the movie. That playful determination paid off. Ryan Gosling's performance as Ken became one of the film's biggest highlights, a perfect balance of humor and vulnerability that audiences adored. Even critics who went in skeptical walked out praising his portrayal. Margot later admitted that Ryan's commitment didn't just make the movie funnier, it elevated the entire production, giving Barbie a heart that no one expected. But here's the interesting part. That same energy, that same warmth and enthusiasm Margot showed toward Ryan was never extended to Blake Lively. Margot could have easily reached out to Blake. She could have offered a cameo, a side character, or even a small producer credit. After all, Blake had the look, the star power, and the fan base to fit the Barbie world. But according to multiple insiders, Margot deliberately chose not to involve her. No phone calls, no meetings, no polite "let's talk," nothing. It wasn't an oversight, it was intentional. Those close to the production said Margot had seen enough of what happened on It Ends With Us and wanted to keep her set drama-free. Rumors of behind-the-scenes chaos, heated arguments, and shifting blame had followed Blake after her fallout with Justin Baldoni. Margot, ever the professional, wasn't willing to risk repeating that scenario. Sources claim that some team members even voiced quiet concern that if Blake were to join the project, it could spark unnecessary tension. Not just with Greta Gerwig or the other Barbies, but potentially even with Ryan Gosling himself. And that's where things get particularly juicy. Because long before Barbie, long before Margot ever donned the pink stilettos, there were whispers of a brief but real connection between Blake Lively and Ryan Gosling. Back in the early 2010s, before either of them had fully settled into their now iconic relationships, Blake and Ryan were spotted together multiple times. They were seen leaving restaurants in LA, laughing a little too closely at after-parties, and walking through New York looking unmistakably cozy. Hollywood insiders described their dynamic as flirty but complicated. The chemistry was there, but so were the warning signs. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it was over. Ryan reportedly ghosted her without explanation, and within weeks, Blake was seen on romantic getaways with Leonardo DiCaprio. Not long after that, she met and eventually married Ryan Reynolds, sealing her status as one half of Hollywood's most glamorous power couples. But that short-lived spark between Blake and Ryan Gosling never quite disappeared from the gossip radar. And when Margot began circling Ryan for Barbie, some couldn't help but remember the past. If Margot really had extended a hand to Blake, that meant potentially bringing two people with a complicated history back onto the same set, and no one wanted to see that tension resurface. In that context, Margot's decision makes perfect sense. Why risk the harmony of a billion-dollar project for the sake of politeness? It wasn't just about protecting the film. It was about protecting the energy of the set. Margot's leadership was rooted in collaboration, not competition. She wanted a team that uplifted each other, not one where every creative decision turned into a tug of war. Inviting Blake into that dynamic, with her track record of alleged control issues and unresolved Hollywood history, could have jeopardized everything. So Margot made a choice, quiet, strategic, and absolutely deliberate. And looking at how things played out, it's hard to argue with her decision. Barbie became one of the most successful, talked-about films of the decade, while Blake Lively found herself battling headlines, controversy, and an increasingly complicated public image. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. One actress built an empire on collaboration and charm, the other on control and controversy. Margot Robbie didn't just convince Ryan Gosling to play Ken, she strategically showered him with attention, charm, and enthusiasm until he couldn't say no. She made him feel like the heartbeat of Barbie. Every interview, every behind-the-scenes moment, it was clear she valued his presence. Meanwhile, Blake Lively, despite her fame and reputation, reportedly couldn't even get a call back. Insiders say that Margot's team quietly but firmly drew a line. Blake was not going to be part of this movie no matter how much star power she brought. And it might not have been personal. It was preventative. Some sources go even further, suggesting that Margot's decision was an act of self-preservation. If Blake had been cast, they claim she might have turned the spotlight into a battlefield, possibly even flipping the narrative and accusing Ryan Gosling of something controversial to reclaim media control. That kind of chaos could have destroyed Barbie before it even premiered. And if there's one thing Margot has mastered, it's protecting her projects and herself. She saw the potential risk and shut it down before it could begin. Because, let's be honest, Blake Lively has a track record of using the media to her advantage. She's done it before and done it well. When she wanted to leave Gossip Girl, reports suddenly surfaced that she was ready to pursue more serious, mature roles. The press conveniently painted her exit as a sign of ambition, not fatigue. Then, right after her short-lived fling with Leonardo DiCaprio ended, the headlines magically shifted again, this time linking her romantically to Ryan Reynolds, even before his divorce from Scarlett Johansson was finalized. The timing was almost too perfect, and many in Hollywood couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. It was classic Blake, shifting the narrative in her favor just when she needed to. And that's where Margot's instincts kicked in. She'd seen how unpredictable things got on It Ends With Us. The arguments, the leaks, and the carefully crafted victim narrative that followed. The moment things didn't go Blake's way, legal drama seemed to explode out of nowhere. Lawsuits, countersuits, statements from sources close to the production, all painting her as misunderstood or wronged. It was messy, and Margot wasn't about to risk that happening on a billion-dollar movie like Barbie. Imagine it. If Blake had clashed with Ryan Gosling on set even slightly, the tabloids would have gone into overdrive. Allegations, tension, speculation, all while Barbie's carefully polished image unraveled. It could have been catastrophic not just for the movie's success, but for Margot's personal reputation as well. After all, Margot and Ryan's on-screen chemistry was undeniable. Their energy together was electric, playful, balanced, magnetic. The internet loved it, and audiences couldn't get enough. But you can bet Blake noticed that chemistry too, watching from the sidelines, possibly with a hint of resentment. And apparently this isn't a one-time issue. Insiders claim that Blake has had similar clashes with other actresses. One of the most talked about being her rumored fallout with Anna Kendrick during A Simple Favor. On screen, their dynamic was perfection. Blake's icy confidence as Emily against Anna's bubbly warmth as Stephanie. But off camera, sources say the atmosphere was tense. The sisterhood people expected never existed. There were no joint interviews, no candid friendship moments, no social media banter, just silence. Insiders described it as professional but cold, with some suggesting that Blake didn't appreciate sharing the spotlight. It didn't stop there. Reports from The Age of Adeline described similar issues: last-minute script changes, constant tension with the wardrobe department, and a general sense that everyone was walking on eggshells. Crew members allegedly joked that working with Blake was like managing a brand, not a person. She reportedly